or books, the pacing is the speed in which the story is progressing for us, the readers or viewers. In role-playing games, we tend to have two main modes of pacing, namely slow-paced and fast-paced. When playing at a slow pace, we let our players take their time, explore the world around them, role-play conversations, and paint their actions using broad strokes. On the other end of the spectrum, we have fast-paced gameplay, where the stakes are high and every action is important. These are your combat scenes, your high-stakes negotiations, or the Mission Impossible break-ins. A common problem among game masters is that they do not know how to control the pace of their sessions. So in this lesson, I want to give you a few simple guidelines on how to control the pace of your game and help your players feel the rush of action in a fast-paced scenes and the calm of the slow-going slice-of-life moments. Let's start with exploring what makes a scene feel slow-paced. Here are 3 guidelines for creating slow-paced scenes. Number 1, leave plenty of breathing room. And by saying breathing room, I mean to leave open threads for your players to pull on. When you're describing the castle's kitchen, add a few extra NPCs, make a few extra doorways, and describe a number of visible cauldrons. Describe things for your players to be interested in. Who is that cleaning boy? What's behind that door? How does this soup smell? Providing a lot of open possibilities prevent the players from immediately focusing on one specific thing, thus avoiding a sense of urgency. Remember, what and how you describe the scene is literally what the players know about the world around their characters. Number 2, encourage open discussion. This can be done by asking open-ended questions that allow your players to explore new ideas, and also by keeping our mouth shut and letting our players talk among themselves. The trick to open-ended questions is to present issues and obstacles, but not possible solutions. When the party is trying to sneak into a fancy event, but there is a bouncer at the door, some GMs might ask, what do you tell the bouncer to let you in? This type of question is very limiting. A slightly better question would be, how do you convince the bouncer to let you pass? Have you noticed that in both cases we directed the players to interact with the bouncer? An even better question would be, how do you try to gain entry to the event? This open-ended question doesn't direct the players in any specific way and leaves room for them to surprise you with original ideas. Tool number 3 for creating slow-paced scenes is to use descriptive cutscenes. When you want to create a leisurely transition, you can simply narrate it without turning it into a task or a challenge. This demonstrates to your players that time is passing without any surprises. Whatever they had planned simply happens. This could be something along the lines of, after you decide to head back from the castle to the inn, you pass through the bustling main street, swimming through the wafting smells of evening meals, and arrive on time at your destination. Use plenty of sensory descriptions and speak slowly to establish a calm atmosphere and set the pace for any follow-up events. By using these 3 guidelines, you can slow the pace of any scene. In other times, you may want to add tension and fast-paced action to your game. The first step is to avoid using the guideline we just discussed for slowing down the pace. Instead, you'll want to use these new guidelines for picking up the pace. Number 1, use quick cuts. A cut is a transition from one action to another. In a role-playing game, this means that after you describe one action, scene, or event, immediately move on to describe the next. For example, 3 orcs enter the room from the right doorway. On your left, one of the dead bodies raises their hand. The door behind you closes. See, quick transitions between events to create a sense of rushing action. Number 2, leave no breathing room. Try to take this advice literally. And by that, I mean try to leave as few pauses as possible between sentences. Finish your descriptions with a question prompting action. This will usually be, what do you do? Or how do you respond? The question itself isn't that important. What's important is that your players feel that the ball is in their court. They should feel the need to respond to what happened. If we continue our previous example, 3 orcs enter the room from the right doorway. On your left, one of the dead bodies raises their hand. The door behind you closes. What do you do? Do you feel the added pressure from the question? Number 3, use a lot of verbs. Fast-paced action is about things happening. So make sure you use a lot of verbs to illustrate the action taking place around the characters. Following up on our example, 3 orcs charge into the room wielding swords from the right doorway. On your left, one of the dead bodies raises their hands, fingers curling into fists. The door behind you slams shut. What do? Feel the difference? Charging orcs, wielding swords, hand raises, fingers curled, door closes. It is of course better when the added verbs are appropriate. The orcs don't enter the room, they charge into the room. The door doesn't close behind you, it slams shut. Number 4, address the next player immediately. When you think a player is done with their turn, make a quick transition by immediately moving on to the next player. To create the sense of fast-paced action, you want there to be as little wait time as possible. So, if the fighter attacks and misses one of the orcs, keep the momentum going by describing the transition between their turn and the next. For example, okay Herman, Bester swings his sword at the orcs and misses. Imani, what does your barbarian do? In order to practice narrating scenes with different pacing, I recommend watching an action movie and pretending it's a role-playing game. At the end of each scene, pause the film and try to think, was this scene an action scene or a role-playing scene? And then think about how you would describe the opening of that scene to your players. What words would you use? How fast would you transition from one action to the next? What elements of the scene would you leave open-ended? Now, actually say that description out loud as if you're GMing and try to see what energy and pace it creates. Does that match the energy and pace of the scene in the movie? The Star Wars movies have a great mix of fast-paced action and slow-paced slice-of-life scenes. If you're not sure where to begin, they're a great option. Controlling the pace of your game is an important skill in your session toolkit. When wielded deftly, the tools presented here will allow you to transfer tension or wonder from the hearts of the player characters into the hearts of your players. See you in the next lesson.